Hello and welcome to a new video from a Gameplay for All Seasons. Today we're going to be talking about a brief history of the Hogwarts Express. So I'm going to kick this video off by talking about an overview of the Hogwarts Express before we look back into the history and how this was all created. We're also going to discuss some inconsistencies with the law and the canon around the Hogwarts Express. And then wrapping it up, I'll just talk about how everything we would have just discussed and how that may affect upcoming games such as Hogwarts Legacy. So starting off then, quick overview of the Hogwarts Express. Most of you listening to this probably know all about the Hogwarts Express, or at least know what it looks like. Essentially, it's the train which takes all of the Hogwarts students up to Hogwarts. It leaves King's Cross Station from the 9 3/4 platform and it goes all the way up to Hogsmeade. It leaves at exactly 11 o'clock on the 1st of September and it takes a few hours to get there. It also makes various other trips throughout the year depending when students need to come backwards and forwards. So that's a very quick overview of the train that we know. Now, looking back over the history, so how did it all come about? What happened? So effectively, if we go back before the Hogwarts Express and why we actually needed one, there was a bit of a headache for the Wizarding world because in September, all the students had to get to Hogwarts without any particular school-provided transport. So you had people doing all sorts of different things. You had some people enchanting carts or taking broomsticks. Some people tried apparating, which didn't work very well because you cannot do that into Hogwarts. And then there was a whole bunch of people who went on magical creatures. So it was all a bit of a headache because you're trying to avoid muggles seeing what you're doing and they're all going there. So they needed to come up with something else. Now, in 1827, there was a change in the Ministry of Magic and the Minister of Magic, Ottoline Gamble, come in. So she was a lady who wanted to try and solve this problem. She spent a few years thinking about it. And then in 1830 is when they took action. So the Hogwarts Express was actually created by muggles, which meant there's quite a lot of the pure Wizarding folk weren't very happy with it, but it was created in Crewe and was just their railway and their train. Now, deciding that would be quite a good way to travel, Ottoline decided she was going to put this big project in to acquire it and use it for the Hogwarts students. Now, this required a lot of work. It was 167 memory charms and the biggest concealment charm that had ever been used in the UK. Now, the result of all this was that the people in Hogsmeade suddenly found that they had a brand new shiny railway station there when they woke up in the morning. You also had the Hogwarts Express, which was now taking students to Hogwarts. And the people of Crewe woke up feeling like something had been misplaced, but they weren't quite sure what it was. So from 1930 then, the Hogwarts Express carried the students. However, it's not really out there in the Wizarding world where it travelled from. We know it went to Hogsmeade, but we don't know where from. The reason we don't know that is because King's Cross, which, as we said at the top of the video, is famously where the train leaves from, was not built until I think it was 1852. So it's in the 1850s where the Hogwarts Express started using that as its starting point. So until then, we don't really know where it came from. So that all sounds like a very nice, tidy story, which it is, and is canon of the Wizarding world. However, as I mentioned again at the top of the video, there are two very notable inconsistencies with reality with this, which is firstly, the Crewe Works didn't actually open until 1840. So the fact that they were supposed to have created it before 1830 makes a bit of a problem. The second point is that if you actually look at the design of the Hogwarts Express, it is actually from the 1930s. So what's that? 100 years after it was apparently taken. Now, perhaps there was some earlier version of the Hogwarts Express and this was a later version that was replaced. There's no mention of that anywhere, but I guess that's the only way you could get out of that one. If you do know on that first one how that is not an inconsistency and how that would have worked, I'd love to hear in the comments because maybe there is something out there that makes that okay. So the last thing I want to discuss then was, what does all this mean for games that are coming out there in the future? An example of which would be the upcoming Hogwarts Legacy game, which should be coming out in 2022 if it doesn't get delayed again. It recently got delayed. It was supposed to be 2021. But yeah, so what does this mean? So it means from just using that game, we know that it is supposed to be set in the late 1800s. So if we look at this, that says the Hogwarts Express should be in there. It should certainly be in there if you go between years, because we don't know if that's going to be set across 1 year, in which case you may completely miss that whole segment. The game seems to start slightly after the beginning of term, so they may get around that. But assuming it's a multi-year thing, you imagine you have to go on Hogwarts Express at one point, which will be interesting. More generally and widely for games, what does it mean? Again, it means if a game is set before the 1850s, then you can't have at least King's Cross in there. You could have the Hogwarts Express, but before 1830s, you just can't have the Hogwarts Express. You have to come up with something else. So again, it all depends on when the games are set. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's just a brief history of Hogwarts Express, as I said. I find all this stuff quite interesting. If you found it interesting as well, more videos like this. Got plenty of videos about Hogwarts Legacy, and going to be plenty more of those to come. Also, I've got other videos out there as well. So if any of that sounds interesting, hit the subscribe button. And if you've enjoyed this video, why not hit the like? I'll see you on the next video.